A little bit of backstory. I went to Miami earlier this year. Didn't know a lot of people there, but I still went. I was 20 at the time and not really jacked, but I know how to hold myself. I got there on a Saturday, and I knew that weekend nights at the beach are where the fun things happen. Night eventually rolled around, and I took an Uber to South Beach. I walked around for about an hour and a half and found a bench to sit down at to check my phone. As I'm sitting down minding my own business, a person walks up to me and sits on the same bench as me. I didn't think much of it. The place was packed, being that it's a weekend night. A few minutes pass by, and he starts up a conversation with me. I will refer to him as Dude. He seemed like a chill person, around the same age as me, average build. I'm usually really good at reading vibes, and I didn't get any negative vibes from him. I tell him that I'm new here, that I had arrived in Miami and that I didn't really know anyone here. That was probably my first mistake. My phone had started to die, and I also needed to use the restroom, but the bars and restaurants there won't let you use the restroom unless you are a customer. So I was shit out of luck. The dude told me that he has a place not far away from here and offered to let me come over to use the restroom and charge my stuff for a few minutes. Looking back now, I should have declined the offer, but I did take him up on the offer. We get to his place, and as soon as I enter, I got really odd vibes. His house was just giving off negative energy, but I don't want to pay it any attention. He tells me where I can plug my stuff in and shows me the way to the bathroom. So after using the bathroom, I walked back into the living room and sat down. My plan was to let my stuff charge for 15 to 20 minutes, then leave. The dude sits down beside me, and we actually had a pretty good conversation at first. He just seemed like a chill person who was trying to be nice. About 5 minutes after he sat down beside me, that's when things took a turn. He gets up, walks to the kitchen and pours 2 glasses of vodka, walks back to me and hands me one. I didn't want to come off as rude, so I took the glass and just held it. I wasn't trying to get drunk, especially around someone I just met. After he realized I wasn't drinking, he kept on trying to get me to drink. He kept saying stuff like,
"Come on, I just want to help you relax some."
I told him I didn't want to drink, and he got visibly upset. He started saying stuff like,
"I let you into my house and you can't take a shot with me?"
At this point, my gut was telling me to get the fuck out of there. I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure his intentions weren't as pure as I had originally thought. As I was trying to figure out a way to leave without upsetting him, he starts to compliment my looks. As someone who was sexually assaulted 2 years ago, my fight or flight response was kicking in. I got up and acted like I was looking for my wallet in my backpack. I acted like I couldn't find it and that I probably left it at the beach. I said that I was going to walk back to the beach and that I would return when I found my wallet. And no, I definitely didn't plan on returning. I packed my stuff, and as I was doing so, the dude started laughing. It was such a demonic laugh, I'll never be able to get it out of my head. I bolt it out of the door and get to the sidewalk and start walking away. I'm not even off the block yet, and I hear his door open back up. The dude starts speed walking towards me as if he was following me, while he was still laughing demonically. My first thought was, okay, well, this is a serial killer. I'm about to be killed. I started to run. I don't know exactly how far I ran, but it was at least 5 blocks. Once I knew he wasn't following me anymore, I spent $10 on an Uber to get me far away from the area. The night was still young and I knew the nightlife would still be active on the beach. So I went back to the beach, just about 10 miles away from my original location, just to make sure if he went back there looking for me, that he wouldn't find me. to the dude who was trying to push himself on me, screw you.
So I'm a 21-year-old male, and this experience happened last summer while I was on vacation at Myrtle Beach with my family. We were staying in a resort right on the beach, and we're on the 13th or 14th floor in a sort of timeshare. One night I was feeling restless and having a hard time falling asleep, and at around 3 a.m., I decided to go out on the balcony to get some air. I stepped out and was stunned as there was a full moon, and the moonlight on the water was really beautiful. The beach was completely empty as far as I could see, and I had never seen it like that before. I decided that since I wasn't able to sleep, I might as well head down, take a stroll, and listen to some music to relax. Hopefully when I returned, I'd be able to get some sleep. It was really unsafe and dumb of me, but since it was 3 a.m. and the rest of my family was asleep, I decided to just head down without letting any of them know I was going, as I thought I would just go and chill there for about 10 to 15 minutes, then come right back up. So at the base of the timeshare we were at, there was an area with a pool, an outdoor bar, and then 2 boardwalks separated by about 100 feet, which both led to the beach. On the sides of the boardwalks, there were swaths of tall grass separating the ocean and the resort. When I got down to the base, the entire area was completely deserted, and I started walking down the boardwalk on the right towards the beach. As I'm walking down, I suddenly see someone approaching me from the beach, which was strange because I had a pretty clear view of the same area from the balcony just before and had literally seen no one. I start to get a bit nervous as I see this figure approach, and as I get closer, I see it as a man, maybe in his late 30s, who has a backpack on and is wearing glasses with large square lenses. As he gets closer, I get a clearer look at him as the boardwalk is sort of illuminated by lights from the outdoor bar. He looks very on edge and alert, almost like he's trying to find someone who's trying to meet him in this area, and his clothes are somewhat tattered. We made eye contact, and I sort of nod at him and pass. At this point, I'm creeped out because, honest to God, he had a sort of Jeffrey Dahmer look, if it was the glasses, and he just didn't seem like he actually belonged to the timeshare. I shake it off and keep walking down the beach and put my headphones in. As I get down to the beach, I turn right and start walking parallel to the water, and I'm just taking in the scenery. I'm barefoot and decided to be nice to walk just along the shoreline, so I move closer to the water and continue walking. I'm walking for no longer than a minute before I get a really strange feeling that something is wrong. I take off my headphones and turn around, and I see a dark figure that is trailing me just upshore. He is situated in between me and the timeshare. I immediately can tell from the figure's height, body type, and demeanor that it is the same man I passed on the boardwalk. At this point, I'm starting to panic, as every story from Let's Read is rushing to my head. At the same time, I'm trying to rationalize, as it feels too surreal that I may actually be in a dangerous situation, so I remind myself it could just be a coincidence, and the man decided he also wanted to take a walk on the beach, and just happened to be headed in the same direction as me. So I take some breaths and turn my head back to the ocean and continue walking in the same direction. After a couple of seconds, I turn my head back again, and seeing that now, he is much closer to me, and is not walking parallel to me, but is definitely actually walking towards me. I picked up my walking speed now and turned my head back around and see he is matching my faster pace and is still walking towards me and the water. Still, for some reason, I think, okay, maybe he also wants to walk by the water. There's no way I'm actually being followed by a creepy man on a deserted beach. So at this point, to truly test it, I do a 180 and completely change directions, and as I turn my head, I see him completely change directions with me and continue closing in distance, and he's power walking now. It suddenly hits me that I'm in a really bad situation, and I take off in a run along the water, and he starts running as well. He stays up shore of me so that if I try to run up towards the boardwalk, he will intercept me. I'm freaking out now and just keep running with no plan, but figured that since I'm 20 and sort of fit, I should probably be able to keep running along the water and outrun him, and then find some other exit off the beach and either call my family or head back to the timeshare on the road. So I keep running, but he's keeping up with me, and this goes on for what feels like 10 to 15 minutes. The scariest part of all of this, which I wouldn't have thought of, is it is completely dead silent. All I hear is my breath and feet on the sand, and when I turn, I only see his shadowy figure upshore keeping pace with me. Suddenly up ahead, in the sand, I see a small blue light and what looks like 4 people on the beach with a blanket. They are a bit upshore. I turn and look at the figure and bet even though they are upshore, I can beat them to these people, so I start sprinting towards them with the hopes of quickly telling them what's going on so we all can confront him. I really use up my energy sprinting towards them, and as I approach, my heart drops. What I see is 4 guys on a blanket, with 3 or 4 handles of hard liquor surrounding them. 3 of the handles are empty, and the 4th is about half empty. 3 of the guys are just completely passed out in the blankets, and the last is half sat up, obviously beyond drunk, with a sort of party hat on that has blue lights on it, and he's talking to himself. His eyes are half closed, and he doesn't even register me approaching him, even though now I'm no more than 5 feet away. I turn and see the figure has slowed down and is observing me, and then I see he makes sense of the group's state and suddenly starts sprinting at me. As he gets closer, the half-passed out guy's blue light illuminates him, and I can clearly see it's the same guy as before. I make eye contact with him, and I can see he's wide-eyed and looks almost manic and is barreling at me full sprint. At this point, I decided to do something decisive. It seemed like I had underestimated his fitness, and since I had just sprinted towards this group and exhausted myself, I was afraid that he might be able to catch up to me if we just continued running along the beach indefinitely, and then who knows what. So instead of turning around and running, I suddenly sprint towards him and to the right, which I don't think he was expecting at all. I catch him off balance and run past him, and I literally am full sprinting back to the timeshare without even looking back. Literally all the hairs on my neck were standing, and it felt like a dream where you're barely evading someone, but he's right about to catch you. The adrenaline was crazy, and I keep running and start to see the timeshare. I finally turn around to see how close he is, and I see him in the distance, maybe 400 to 500 feet away. He's lost a lot of distance on me. I don't waste any time and sprint up the boardwalk and towards the base of the timeshare. I jam the elevator buttons and leap in, and start mashing the closed door button as I'm gasping for air. The door closes and I hit the button for my floor, and when the elevator reaches, I literally sprint back to my room, open the door, enter, and then slam the door and double lock it. I'm breathing heavy and I drop to the floor and just sit there for a minute, not believing what just happened. I crouch and crawl over to my room as I was literally afraid he might be able to see through the window on our balcony, and I enter my room. Let's just say I definitely wasn't able to sleep after that. September 2008. A woman walks into a New York City branch of the coffee chain Starbucks. Her name is Hannah Up, and like all other customers, her presence is recorded on the small number of CCTV cameras that are present in the store. Yet when asked her name so it can be written on the side of her cup, Hannah doesn't give her real name. But not out of any kind of duplicitousness. You see, Hannah doesn't realize who she is. In fact, the young woman seemed to have forgotten herself entirely. Hannah grew up in Oregon, the daughter of 2 Methodist ministers. As a result of their parents' profession, Hannah spent a great deal of her youth in a handful of predominantly Japanese-American churches in her native state, where her parents both served as pastors. The family shared a deep connection with the Japanese migrant community, to the point where Hannah's mother, Barbara, spoke fluent Japanese after spending a few years teaching in Kyoto. Hannah had a mostly healthy and happy relationship with her parents, but obviously both were rigid in their religious beliefs. This made it difficult for Hannah to communicate the fact that, as she grew older, she found herself more attracted to some of the other girls at school, rather than her male counterparts. This quite possibly motivated her to relocate to the much more liberal New York City after her graduation from the Pennsylvania Seven Sisters College in 2007. It was there that she funded the pursuit of her master's degree by working as a teacher, all the while volunteering for a charity that provided assistance to those suffering from HIV and AIDS. She was highly intelligent, outgoing, and by all accounts had a great sense of humor, so she was spoken highly of by all that had the good fortune to know her. At age 23, Hannah transferred to a middle school in Harlem named the Thurgood Marshall Academy. She was reportedly very excited at the posting and felt it gave her a chance to make a real difference among some of the city's most vulnerable youth. On the first day of classes in September of 2008, Hannah didn't show up to work, and it quickly became obvious that she had vanished. The disappearance of a beloved middle school teacher quickly became a high-profile case among local and national media outlets. Hannah's face was on almost every local news channel, all of which asked the public for any and all information related to her disappearance. These efforts were reinforced by scores of Hannah's friends and former classmates who canvassed New York City with thousands of leaflets and flyers in the hopes that it might generate some clues. From what law enforcement could gather, Hannah left her downtown apartment on a jog that she never returned from. Yet 10 days later, Hannah's Apple ID was used at an NYC Apple store. Police had employees pull up the relevant CCTV footage, feeling a great deal of relief that the tape showed Hannah to be alive and well. However, the employees had something rather disturbing to report. Although the woman in the footage was quite obviously Hannah Up, when approached by an old high school friend, Hannah apparently denied being herself altogether. Hey, Hannah, it's me. Are you alright? Everyone's looking for you." But instead of offering an explanation for her disappearance, Hannah apparently responded with, "Excuse me, my name isn't Hannah." The Apple Store employee later said that Hannah's response seemed frustrated, like it wasn't the first time that day where someone had approached her in such a way. The interaction seemed to have irritated Hannah so much that she walked away from the man and out of the store entirely. It was then that she made her way to the aforementioned branch of Starbucks and then onto a nearby gym, where it's assumed that she worked out and showered. Investigators were hot on Hannah's trail but couldn't quite seem to catch up with her. Despite the bizarre, forgetful episode, she seemed to be taking care of herself and wasn't acting in a self-destructive manner, which is why it was so confusing for investigators when members of the New York Harbor Police pulled her out of the Hudson in a severely dehydrated state, with absolutely no memory of the previous few weeks. She once again knew who she was, but offered no explanation for the events of the previous few weeks, nor her disappearance. After a few days' worth of recovery in a New York hospital, doctors declared that the most likely explanation for Hannah's bizarre episode was what was known as a dissociative fugue. In a dissociative fugue, people lose some or all memories of their past, and they usually disappear from their usual environments, leaving their family and job. The word fugue comes from the Latin words for flight and flee. The condition is sometimes given the playful nickname of Jason Bourne syndrome, in reference to the movies about a CIA agent suffering from a dissociative fugue who remembers nothing but his extensive training. Many of those who experience dissociative fugue states do so because they have suffered from a tremendous amount of trauma. But Hannah's mother later insisted that her fugue episodes don't appear to have any clear or obvious triggers, and when asked, Hannah could not recall any traumatizing events she had endured. The family even paid for an intense hypnotherapy session in which a trained hypnotist attempted to unearth any buried trauma or memories that may be affecting Hannah on a subconscious level. Yet after zero progress was made after numerous appointments, the hypnotherapist was baffled, and nothing in the way of trauma could be discovered. People have been known to not only travel across cities or countries, but also across continents, said Professor Emeritus of Psychiatry at Indiana University. The explanation behind the fugue is that the person is running away from a bad situation, from a bad marriage or a bad financial situation. According to numerous news outlets, one of Hannah's close friends made an attempt to discuss the 2008 fugue with Hannah, but said she often just sat in silence, almost like she was completely unable to talk about it. It felt like the words we have in the English language were not sufficient to describe this. This friend later added, and we can only imagine her frustration at her dear friend being unable to properly articulate what had happened. The following year, Hannah sat down with a reporter in a coffee shop and once again attempted to describe her terrifying ordeal in her own words, and this is what she said. It goes from, like, going to a run to, like, being in the ambulance. For me, that was like 10 minutes past, but in reality, it was more like 3 weeks. The hardest part is the period right after. You feel shame when you feel embarrassed or you feel guilt. All things that I've definitely felt. It's weird. How do you feel guilty for something you didn't even know you did? It's not your fault, but it's still somehow you. So it's definitely made me reconsider everything. Who was I before? Who was I then? Is that part of me? Who am I now? My roommates and I have a code word to show that I'm not going to fugue again, Hannah went on to say. My roommate had done this long interview with ABC, and the only thing they ended up printing was that I was a friendly vegetarian who likes to try new dishes. So if I don't get home one night, they'll text me like, "Friendly vegetarian," and I'll reply with, "Who likes to try new dishes," so we know we're on the same page. In early 2010, Hannah left her life in New York behind, moving to Philadelphia for a few months while she worked at a Quaker study retreat named Pendle Hill. It was here that she met a young man by the name of Patrick Rosal, and the pair had dated for a while before Hannah shared the story of her fugue episode with him. Being the good-natured soul that he was, Patrick didn't seem to be bothered by the revelation and considered it a freak accident. "The way I see it," Patrick later said, "Hannah gives so much to other people that at a certain point there is literally nothing left, and she departs from herself." Hannah spent a few years in Philly before again moving on, this time to Maryland in September of 2013. But it's here that she experienced yet another bout of dissociative fugue that lasted 2 days. She suddenly came to when she found herself sitting in a creek with a shopping cart beside her. But despite the confusing and terrifying experience, she noticed a kind of trend that linked her fugue episodes together. 1. They tended to happen at the start of the school year. 2. Her pattern of behavior tended to focus around wandering whichever city she was living in. And 3. She always came out of her fugue when in contact with a body of water. With these in mind, Hannah quickly decided to move somewhere with plenty of water where she couldn't roam too far or into anything too dangerous. So in 2014, Hannah got herself a job as a teaching assistant in the U.S. Virgin Islands, moving to the island of St. Thomas where she embraced a new life and new friends. By all accounts, Hannah loved her new life on the island and found working with preschoolers to be extremely rewarding. Then, days after a Category 5 hurricane and days before yet another one, Hurricane Irma and Maria, friends noticed something was off. She seemed super out of it. They described her as being almost in a trance. On yet another beautiful September day, 32-year-old Hannah Emily Upp disappeared again. On September 14, 2017, she told her roommates she was headed over to the Montessori school to help them prepare for the incoming hurricanes. She got in their car and was never seen again. Despite desperate searches for local homeless shelters, beaches, hospitals, and even the morgue, Hannah was nowhere to be found. But given how she always seemed to turn up or reassociate whenever coming into contact with water, the cops figured it was only a matter of time before she showed up. In an attempt to intercept her before she endangered herself, police searched for Hannah around the island's marina, asking various ship captains and crew members if they'd seen an American girl exhibiting any unusual behavior. None had, but it was at one of these marinas, Sapphire Beach to be specific, that the cops found Hannah's abandoned car. Inside were a number of her personal items, such as passport and purse, which contained a few $100 in cash. Nearby was a small beach bar that served burgers and beer locals and tourists alike. It was there that Hannah's sarong, sundress, and sandals were found, neatly folded on a bar stool as if she planned to return to them to collect them after swimming. Terrified that Hannah has drowned, the Coast Guard sent 3 helicopters to search for her, while Hannah's friends checked the manifests of people evacuated from the island on mercy ships. But again, not a single trace of her was ever located, and the search for her unearthed far more questions than answers. The only logical explanation was that Hannah had gone to take a swim, gotten caught in a strong current, and then drowned. But if Hannah had drowned, her body would likely float to the surface within a few days. An emergency medical technician named Jacob Bradley circled the island in a rescue boat for hours on end in the days that followed, but again, no sign of the missing teacher was ever found. He He even paid a visit to the St. Thomas morgue, as well as several others on the surrounding islands. All in all, he inspected 10 different drowning victims, and none were Hannah. The situation progressed to the point that Hannah's mother, Barbara moved out to St. Thomas to organize and aid in the search for her daughter. Her move came just after a devastating hurricane, and doubtless this hampered the effort to locate Hannah, either living or dead. It has never been an option to give up. Hope is persistent, and many people join me in that hope, Barbara later said. I've heard from many people here that it's very, very rare for people to drown while swimming, and then when they do, the bodies are found relatively quickly. This has been affirmed by local law enforcement who confess to being stumped by the mystery of Hannah's disappearance. But still, they're inclined to go with the most logical explanation, while Hannah's mother is on the record as saying, "I don't think she went out into the water. Everything that goes out comes back this way. She'd have washed up quickly." Hannah seems to be one of the rare missing person cases where even the most logical explanation has glaring holes in it. For all intents and purposes, Hannah waded in the Caribbean Sea that day, slipping beneath the waves, never to return. To avoid detection by the Coast Guard and EMTs in their search boats, Hannah's body would have to have been dragged along the seabed for miles on end, and even then, it would have floated back to land eventually thanks to the rather predictable currents of the Caribbean Sea. It would be folly to ascribe Hannah's disappearance to supernatural means, but it's difficult not to imagine the terrifying eldritch fates that might lead a troubled young woman to disappear once and for all, even after years of fighting to contain her psychological disorder. For years, the public had focused on the question of who took Hannah up. But in reality, a much more pertinent question might well be, what took Hannah up?